Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.
Picture this. You wake up on a Friday morning.
Yeah.
The sun is, it's barely up. Your eyes are still adjusting to the light. And you reach over to your bedside table.
Like we all do.
Right, exactly. You grab your smartphone, you tap the screen, and there it is, a notification badge on WhatsApp.
Oh, the dreaded group chat notification.
Exactly. You open it up, and you're greeted by a dozen glittering floral graphics.
Maybe some animated stars in there, too.
Oh, definitely animated stars. Maybe a picture of a beautiful mosque with golden calligraphy, and they all read some variation of Jumu'ah, Mubarak, Blessed Friday.
Right.
And on the surface, when you look at that screen, you probably feel a sense of warmth. I mean, it feels like a completely harmless expression of community love.
Yeah, it really does.
It feels like your friends, your aunts, your coworkers are reaching across the digital divide to wrap you in this, warm little digital hug before you start your day.
That's a great way to put it.
But what if I told you that this simple, seemingly innocent text message is actually the epicenter of a massive, multi-layered theological, jurisprudential, and psychological debate?
It really is a perfect storm,
Right.
honestly. What we are looking at here is, well, it's the exact moment where modern technology violently crashes into classical orthodoxy.
Wow. Violently crashes.
Yeah, because we aren't just talking about a simple greeting, even if it feels that way when you receive it.
Right.
We are looking at a modern phenomenon that forces us to question the very architecture of how we define worship.
Is that deep?
It is. It challenges how we protect sacred traditions. And perhaps most urgently, it exposes how our brains and our souls, really, are being aggressively rewired by digital communication.
Okay, let's unpack this, because before we can even begin to figure out how you, the listener sitting here with us, should react to those Jumu'ah Mubarak messages sitting in your inbox right now,
Yep.
we need to understand the fundamental legal framework.
Huh.
The framework that Orthodox Sunni Islam uses to classify human actions. We basically have to look at how a classical scholar actually views a modern text message.
Right. And to understand the scholarly perspective, you really have to look at the doctrine of Tawqif.
Tawqif, let's define that.
So this is the theological mandate that all acts of worship, literally everything categorized as ibadah, must have explicit, definitive proof derived directly from the Quran or the authentic Sunnah.
Okay.
Worship is, essentially, a locked box. God and his messenger are the only ones with the key. You cannot add to it, and you cannot subtract from it.
So no improvising.
Zero improvising. So when we look at the perspective of strict orthodoxy, scholars like Sheikh Nasiruddin Albani and Sheikh Salih ibn Fawzan advance a historically devastating argument.
Devastating how?
Well, they look at the early generations, the Salih, the Sahaba. These were people whose devotion to Islam is unparalleled in human history, right?
Right.
Their awareness of the immense virtues of Friday was absolute. They revered it.
Yeah, I mean, they loved Friday more than anyone alive today could possibly love Friday. They understood its gravity on a level we can barely comprehend.
Exactly. Yet, despite that overwhelming theological supremacy, there is absolutely zero historical or textual record of the Sahaba routinely congratulating one another with phrases like Jumu'ah Mubarak every single week.
Nothing at all.
Nothing. There are no narrations of Umar or Abu Bakr, standing at the doors of the mosque in Medina shaking hands and saying Jumu'ah Tayyiba.
Wow, okay.
So Sheikh Salih al-Fawzan argues that because those early generations did not establish this as a Friday custom, contemporary Muslims absolutely must not introduce it.
Because it implies we know better.
Right. The foundational logic of orthodoxy is that all theological goodness lies in mimicking their precedent, not inventing our own modern add-ons.
Okay, let me push back on this gently.
Sure.
Because if you're listening to this deep dive, you might be thinking, come on, it's just a nice thing to say. Where's the actual harm in wishing someone a blessed day?
It's a very common reaction.
But I want to frame it with an analogy. Imagine you have a master teacher who gives you a perfect, comprehensive, flawless syllabus for a course.
Oh.
It has everything you need to pass. Now, imagine you decide to start adding your own mandatory chapters to the textbook, and you start handing them out to the rest of the class.
I see where you're going with this.
By doing that, you are implicitly suggesting that the master teacher forgot something, right? You were implying the syllabus wasn't actually perfect, and it needed your modern update to be complete.
That is the exact epistemological danger that Sheikh Suleiman al-Majid highlights. It's a really brilliant way to frame it.
Oh, thank you.
He argues that exchanging Jumu'ah Mubarak fundamentally falls under the category of supplications, of dua, and remembrances deck.
Because you're asking for a blessing?
Yes. And by accepting this specific time-bound greeting without any textual authority, you establish a highly precarious logical precedent. You are literally adding a chapter to the syllabus.
Because if we legitimize Jumu'ah Mubarak as a weekly ritual, what stops the floodgates from opening?
Nothing does.
Right. Why not invent specific mandatory congratulations after every single daily prayer?
You hit the nail on the head. If we apply the logic that it's just a nice thing to say, then you could start a tradition of hugging and saying a specific synchronized phrase after dur.
And another unique one after Azur.
Exactly. But that practice is undeniably absent from the prophetic tradition. So, establishing the Friday greeting as a weekly religious ritual is heavily critiqued because it infringes upon the fixed boundaries of Islamic worship.
It compromises that locked box.
It compromises Tawqif entirely. It takes the locked box of worship and tries to pick the lock with good intentions.
But let me take that a step further, because there is an entirely different way to look at this, isn't there?
Yes, there is.
Not everything a human being does is an act of worship. Sometimes a cultural habit is just a cultural habit.
Absolutely.
If I ask my coworker, how was your weekend? I'm not trying to establish a new religious liturgy. I'm just being a human being.
And that pivots us to the alternative jurisprudential lens. This one relies heavily on the classical polymath Ibn Taymiyyah.
Okay, what did he say?
He established a massive foundational legal maxim regarding human action. He said that, yes, the default ruling in matters of worship is strict prohibition unless explicitly legislated.
The locked box.
The locked box. However, the default ruling in worldly customs and human transactions, what we call urf or adat, is absolute permissibility.
Unless there's an explicit text prohibiting it.
Precisely. Innocence is the default for culture.
So if I send a text message and I'm not intending for it to be a divine act of worship that earns me some specific heavenly reward, I'm just doing it because it's a Thursday night and I love my friends, Ibn Taymiyyah's maxim would say that's totally fine.
Yes. Modern scholars like Abu Ammar Yasir Qadi frequently navigate the application of this exact paradigm.
How does he apply it?
Well, for him, the critical determining factor is the intent, the naya, and the overarching perception of the masses.
So how society views it.
Right. If a communal celebration or a specific greeting is categorized by the society strictly as an act of worship designed to draw you closer to God, it requires definitive textual proof. It needs the key.
But if it's not...
But if it is viewed purely as a social custom, just an expression of general communal goodwill that happens to fall on a Friday, it falls under the umbrella of permissibility.
Okay, what about the Eid analogy? Because this is the most common defense I hear.
Oh yeah, it comes up all the time.
Right. On Eid al-Fitr, or Eid al-Adha, we say, Taqabbal Allahu minna wa minkum, may Allah accept from us and you. And we know from authentic traditions that Friday is legally considered a weekly Eid for Muslims.
That's correct.
So isn't there a very clear, highly logical bridge there? If you can congratulate someone on the annual Eid, why is it suddenly an innovation to congratulate them on the weekly Eid?
It is a very strong logical bridge, honestly.
Yeah.
And it is precisely the argument many proponents of the permissibility view use.
Because there's a precedent.
Because the Sahaba were documented, congratulating one another on the annual Eids, extending a greeting of blessing on the weekly Eid is viewed by some jurists as a legitimate, culturally derived extension of that exact precedent.
It operates within the spirit of the law.
It does. But, and this is a massive caveat that we cannot ignore, the individual must never, under any circumstances, elevate the phrase Jumu'ah Mubarak to the status of an obligatory prophetic sunnah.
Meaning, the moment you get mad at your friend for not saying it back, you've crossed the line.
Precisely. You cannot look down upon or judge someone who chooses not to say it. The moment you believe it is religiously mandatory or you feel a sense of spiritual superiority for sending it, you have crossed from permissible cultural custom back into the dangerous territory of unauthorized religious innovation.
You've turned culture into liturgy.
Exactly.
That is a terrifyingly fine line to walk.
It really is.
Especially in the digital age. I mean, things become rituals so quickly now. You do something 3 weeks in a row on WhatsApp, and suddenly it feels like a religious obligation to keep the streak going.
The gamification of habits.
Yeah. So we have the strict view of impermissibility to fiercely protect the sunnah, and the view of permissibility based on cultural custom. Is there a practical middle path for the person listening to this who just wants to survive their family group chat without starting a theological war?
Yes. Dr. Muhammad Salah introduces what I think is a deeply pastoral, responsive middle path.
Casserole. I like that.
Yeah, he navigates the intense tension between strict textual adherence and the very real need for social cohesion. His advice: don't initiate.
Just don't start it.
Right, don't be the person sending out the automated broadcast list every Friday morning, because by initiating, you contribute to the institutionalization of potential bid'ah. You are helping turn a habit into a ritual.
But what if I receive one? What if my elderly aunt, who has absolutely no idea what Usul al-Fiqh is, sends me a beautiful graphic with roses on it?
Which happens to all of us.
Exactly. If I leave her on read because I'm trying to protect the sunnah, I'm going to break her heart.
And that is exactly where the middle path operates. If you receive a greeting, particularly from a layperson, an elderly family member, or perhaps a recent convert who is just trying to feel connected to the ummah, it is not only permissible, but often socially necessary to respond courteously.
Because ignoring it would violate an even bigger rule, right? It balances the Orthodox desire to protect the purity of the religion with the overarching Quranic mandate to maintain akhlaq, good character.
Spot on. It protects ukhuwah, communal bonds. If you ignore your aunt out of a sense of strict juristic rigidity, you could inadvertently sever family ties, silab al-rahim.
And severing family ties is a major sin.
A huge sin. The calculus here is profound. You do not initiate to protect the sunnah, but you reply kindly to maintain love and harmony, preventing a major sin of division.
But wait, if Dr. Salah says we have to respond to grandma's text just to be polite, doesn't that put a massive burden on the receiver?
It definitely adds a layer of responsibility.
Let's look at how the Quran actually regulates the weight of a greeting, because this traces sequentially back to Surah An-Nisa, verse 86. We need to examine the divine mechanics of how and why we interact.
The verse states, "And when you are greeted with a greeting, greet in return with one better than it, or at least return it in a like manner. Indeed, Allah is ever, over all things, an accountant."
Wow.
This isn't just poetry. This verse is the foundational blueprint for all Islamic social interaction and diplomacy. When we dive into the classical tafsir, Al-Tabari in Jamiz al-Bayan emphasizes that this verse establishes a universal divine mandate for reciprocity.
It makes reciprocity a divine command, not just, Emily Post etiquette.
Exactly. The command to return a greeting with one that is equal or superior isn't just a suggestion for good manners at a dinner party. Al-Tabari views it as a legally binding mechanism engineered by the Creator to foster peace, to actively neutralize latent hostility, and to build social trust within a community.
That is so viscerally relevant to our digital lives right now. Think about the physiological reaction you get when you are left on read.
Oh, it's the worst.
You send a vulnerable message, you see those 2 blue check marks light up, and then nothing. Silence.
Your stomach just drops.
It breeds instant resentment. It feels inherently hostile. So Al-Tabari, writing in the 9th century, is essentially diagnosing our modern digital anxiety.
That's a profound way to look at it.
He is telling us that gracious reciprocity is our default setting as believers because human egos are fragile and God wants to protect the community from resentment.
And classical jurists took the preservation of that communal trust incredibly seriously.
I'm sure they did.
Yeah. Al-Qurtubi expands on the strict legal parameters of this dynamic in Al-Jam Liakam al-Quran. He notes a fascinating legal shift here. While initiating a greeting like saying salam is categorized as a highly recommended sunnah, responding to a greeting is definitively wajib. It is obligatory.
It upgrades.
It completely upgrades.
The moment someone extends their hand or sends a text, your optional good deed becomes a mandatory obligation.
It does. And this nuance is absolutely critical to the Jumu'ah Mubarak debate. If you receive this greeting, you are bound by the broader Quranic obligation to reply, fulfilling the rights of brotherhood.
But there's a catch, isn't there?
There always is. Al-Qurtubi doesn't just stop at the obligation. He adds a layer of caution that is striking when we map it onto our digital era. He discusses the gender dynamics of greetings.
Oh, interesting.
He notes that interactions must never lead to fitna or temptation. The obligation to respond does not override the obligation to maintain spiritual safety.
Which speaks directly to the reality of having a smartphone that gives you 24/7 access to everyone in your contact list. Just because you can text someone doesn't mean you should.
The modern application of Al-Qurtubi's ruling demands strict digital boundaries. Exchanging Friday greetings is common, yes, but text messaging between non-mahram men and women, those who are not immediate family or spouses, must maintain strict professional and spiritual distance.
Because digital accessibility creates this illusion of intimacy.
Exactly. The greeting must never become a Trojan horse for inappropriate digital familiarity.
It's all about spiritual professionalism online. Keep the boundaries firm. Now, here's where it gets really interesting for me.
Tell me.
When we look at Fakhr al-Din al-Razi's theological analysis of this same verse, he doesn't just look at the legal rulings, he looks at the psychological warfare against the ego.
Razi is brilliant here. He highlights the psychological incentive embedded within the demand for a better response.
Right, outdoing each other.
If someone says peace, the Quran commands you to say peace and mercy. By doing this, the Quran institutionalizes a perpetual escalation of goodwill. It forces the society into an arms race of kindness.
I love that phrase, an arms race of kindness.
You're constantly out-kinding one another, which transforms basic societal civility into an act of profound spiritual consciousness, taqwa.
And Razi points out the very end of the verse, which honestly hits so hard, Allah is ever, over all things, an accountant.
It's a heavy reminder.
It really is. It makes you realize that even a microscopic digital interaction, a quick reply on WhatsApp, the sincerity behind the specific emoji you chose is literally recorded, cataloged, and weighed on the day of judgment. It makes every single tap on your screen a matter of ultimate cosmic consequence.
It forces you to realize you are never acting in a vacuum. And if Surah An-Nisa teaches us how to greet one another, we absolutely must turn to Surah al-Jumu'ah to understand the immense gravity of the day we are supposedly greeting each other about.
Because honestly, the digital pleasantries we've been debating pale in comparison to the intense, almost terrifying Quranic mandate for Friday itself.
The contrast is jarring. We are arguing over floral text messages while the Quran is demanding an earth-shattering shift in our weekly reality.
Let's look at the tafsir of Surah al-Jumu'ah verses 9 through 11. The Quran says, "O you who have believed, when the adhan is called for the prayer on the day of Jumu'ah, then proceed to the remembrance of Allah and leave trade. That is better for you if you only knew."
When we look at Ibn Kathir's Tafsir al-Quran al-Azim, he unpacks the linguistic and historical context of this verse in a way that should completely disrupt our modern Friday routines.
How so?
He focuses on the Arabic word fasal, which is typically translated as hasten or proceed. But Ibn Kathir clarifies that this does not imply physically running or rushing in a panic to the mosque. In fact, the Prophet Muhammad explicitly forbade running to prayer. He commanded worshippers to walk with tranquility, with sakina.
So if it doesn't mean physical running, what does hasten actually look like in practice?
It denotes a conscious, deliberate, and urgent internal prioritization of Allah's remembrance over all worldly affairs.
An internal urgency.
Yes. Ibn Kathir details the cosmic significance of Friday to explain why this internal urgency is demanded. Friday isn't just the end of the work week, it is the day Allah completed creation. It is the day Adam was created and the day he was placed in paradise. And terrifyingly, it is the day the final hour will commence. Therefore, the absolute prohibition of commerce after the second adhan isn't just about pausing your job. It forces a total, non-negotiable detachment from the material world.
And the tafsir of Al-Jalalain takes that detachment and makes it hyper-literal, doesn't it?
It does. Authored by Jalal al-Din al-Mahali and Jalal al-Din al-Suyuti, this concise tafsir notes that the command to leave aside commerce technically suspends the validity of all worldly contracts during the prayer window.
Or it really suspends them entirely.
Entirely. If you buy or sell something during that time, the contract is spiritually and legally void. And the remembrance of all mentioned in the verse directly refers to the khutbah and the congregational prayer itself. The core life lesson they extract is one of total, unadulterated physical and mental presence.
Which brings up a really sharp, incredibly uncomfortable modern critique for all of us. Let's be honest about what happens in the mosque today.
I think I know where you're going.
You are sitting on the carpet, the imam is delivering the khutbah, and you secretly have your phone hidden in your lap.
We've all seen it.
You feel it buzz, and you mindlessly tap out a reply to a Jumu'ah Mubarak broadcast. By doing that, you have completely voided the spiritual reward of the assembly.
According to many scholars, yes.
Your physical body is in the mosque, but your mind is actively violating the divine command to leave the dunya. You are engaged in a digital transaction of social capital, while the creator of the universe is demanding your total presence.
It is a staggering contradiction. You are performing the aesthetics of Friday while actively ignoring the substantive command of Friday. And this connects perfectly to Sayyid Qutb's socio-psychological analysis in Fizlal al-Quran.
What was his take?
Qutb observes that human beings are naturally deeply predisposed to be consumed by the allure of earning a livelihood. We are obsessed with accumulating wealth, status, and security.
I mean, the modern 9-to-5 grind is literally designed to consume every waking thought you have. The emails never stop. The Slack notifications never stop. It is a suffocating environment.
And Qutb argues that the divine command to abruptly abandon commerce right at the height of the Friday workday midday, when markets are busiest, is a radical, intentional disruption of the capitalist impulse.
A divine intervention into our greed.
Exactly. He emphasizes that the Muslim community requires this repeated weekly educational mechanism to forcefully free their lungs from the suffocating materialistic air of the dunya. You have to be forced to remember that your provision comes from God, not your employer.
It's a mandatory breath of fresh air for the soul. The modern lesson is so stark here. True celebration of Friday isn't found in the micro effort of sending an emoji to 50 people. It is found in the radical, rebellious act of disconnecting from the global economy to submit completely to the Creator.
But we have to be careful because Islam is also a religion of profound balance, which Sayyid Abul al-Maududi highlights beautifully in his Tawqif al-Quran.
Right, we can't ignore the rest of the day.
He looks at the very next verse, verse 10, which says, "Once the prayer is over, disperse throughout the land and seek the bounty of Allah." Maududi notes that the Friday prayer is not meant to foster monasticism.
Islam does not want you to become a monk who ignores the world.
Right. It isn't meant to promote economic negligence.
You don't just stay in the mosque all day ignoring your family's bills.
Precisely. The beauty of the Islamic system is this perfect equilibrium, intense, completely undistracted spiritual devotion followed immediately by ethical, vigorous economic pursuit. The believer is supposed to carry the spiritual consciousness, the taqwa acquired during the prayer, right back out into the marketplace.
So you are a better, more honest business person at 3:00 p.m. because you stood in prayer at 1:30 p.m.
That's the ideal, yes.
I love how contemporary scholar Numan Ali Khan brings a linguistic insight to this that just turns our modern lives upside down.
Oh, his analysis on this is fantastic.
He points out how the Quran commands believers to hasten to prayer, but to walk or disperse through the earth to seek provision. He says we have it totally backward today.
We really do.
Think about your morning commute. We speed recklessly through traffic, risking our lives, white-knuckling the steering wheel to get to business meetings on time, but we stroll casually, checking our phones, arriving late to prayer.
It's embarrassing when you put it like that.
It is. The Quranic linguistic structure demands a psychological regency for the hereafter and a patient, measured, trusting approach to worldly wealth.
It is a complete inversion of modern priorities. We prioritize what is temporary and delay what is eternal. And having seen these intense, demanding Quranic requirements for Friday, we really must look at how the classical giants of scholarship protected this sacred time.
Yes. How did they treat Friday, and what can their guardianship of tradition teach us about the shallowness of our modern digital habits?
Let's dive into that classical scholarship because the contrast is going to be incredibly revealing. We have to start with Ibn Qayyim al-Jawziyya and the architecture of the weekly Eid.
In his magnum opus, Zad al-Ma'ad.
Yes, he lists 33 specific documented virtues of Friday. He definitively, unapologetically categorizes it as a weekly festival, a weekly Eid.
33 virtues. He exhaustively catalogs its greatness.
He does. He notes that Friday is a day of supreme congregational gathering, a day when minor sins are completely forgiven between the current and previous Friday, and crucially, a day containing a specific hidden hour wherein supplications are unequivocally answered by Allah.
So let me ask a provocative question.
Go for it.
If Ibn Qayyim loved Friday so much, if he spent pages and pages detailing its 33 virtues, and he explicitly considered it an Eid celebration, wouldn't he have loved a Friday greeting? Why didn't he encourage the people of Damascus to say Jumu'ah Mubarak to each other back then? It seems like a glaring omission.
That is the exact question that reveals the massive gap in the modern justification for the greeting.
How so?
Despite his exhaustive, passionate praise for Friday, and despite his meticulous detailing of its etiquettes, like the physical acts of wearing clean clothes, applying perfume, and the spiritual act of reciting Surah Al-Kahf, Ibn Qayyim never documented the practice of verbal congratulations for it.
Not once.
Not once. This highlights a fundamental tectonic shift in paradigms. Classical reverence was deeply physically action-oriented. Modern ritualization is highly speech-oriented and, frankly, incredibly passive.
It's the difference between doing the work and just talking about doing the work.
Exactly.
We want the quick fix of saying a nice phrase rather than engaging in the heavy lifting of actual worship. Which brings us to Ibn Rajab al-Hanbali.
Yes, his work Lata'if al-Marif is the definitive classical text on navigating sacred time. He explores how a believer must interact with cyclical spiritual opportunities, Ramadan, the first 10 days of Dhul Hijjah, and Friday.
What was his main takeaway?
He notes that a holiday in Islam is not characterized by mere sport, play, or passive relaxation. It is characterized by elevated remembrance, profound thankfulness, and the active, desperate pursuit of divine pardon.
I want to make sure we understand the weight of this. When Ibn Rajab talks about a holiday, it's not a day off to binge watch TV and eat snacks. It's an intensification of worship.
It's supposed to be harder work, spiritually.
I was thinking about an analogy for this. The way we treat Friday with these text messages, it's like paying for an expensive gym membership, putting on the activewear, taking a selfie in front of the weights, posting it with a motivational quote, and then going home without ever breaking a sweat.
That is painfully accurate.
We are substituting the heavy lifting of the soul with the light tapping of a touchscreen. We want the credit for celebrating Friday without putting in the spiritual sweat equity. The classical scholars wanted the sweat equity.
That analogy perfectly captures the danger Ibn Rajab was warning against. The critical insight from him is the absolute emphasis on internal transformation rather than external proclamation.
Internal over external.
Yes, the true celebration of Friday is achieved through acts of unseen devotion, fasting, private dua, silent reflection. The modern habit of sending a Jumu'ah Mubarak text actively risks externalizing a devotion that Ibn Rajab argued must remain intensely private and transformative.
You are taking what should be a private revolution of the heart and turning it into a public performance.
And when we look at al-Dhahabi, the renowned historian and hadith master, we see why these scholars were so fiercely protective of that private, action-oriented sunnah.
But why would al-Dhahabi view a simple text message or a verbal greeting as an insult to the prophet? That seems like a massive leap to the modern ear.
To understand al-Dhahabi, you have to understand the historical psychology of preserving early Islam. He lived at a time where the religion had been fully completed and perfected during the Prophet's life.
Right.
His strict vetting of actions demonstrates a profound principle. When a subsequent generation introduces a religious practice not sanctioned by the Prophet or his companions, it inherently implies a deficiency in the prior generation's practice.
If the religion was perfected, as the Quran states, you can't improve upon perfection.
Exactly. If saying Jumu'ah Mubarak was objectively good and brought you closer to God, the Prophet would have told us to do it. By inventing it, you are suggesting, even subconsciously, that you have discovered a pathway to God's pleasure that the Prophet somehow missed.
Wow.
The orthodox aversion to Jumu'ah Mubarak is not rooted in a disdain for community. It's not about scholars being grumpy, anti-joy, or overly strict just for the sake of it. It is about a fierce, jealous, protective love for the historical perfection of the prophetic model.
So what does this all mean? We've heard the classical giants. We understand the fiqh, the tafsir, the fierce protection of the sunnah. Now we must translate all of these ancient, massive truths into actionable life lessons for the modern listener holding a smartphone right now. We need to talk about psychology, sincerity, and digital adab in our current era.
This is where we have to bridge the gap between theory and reality. The transition from analog to digital communication has created a massive, unprecedented crisis of sincerity.
A crisis of sincerity. That sounds serious.
It is. Usama al-Shurafa critically addresses this in his teachings on the Rizq framework. He emphasizes that the sequence of righteous deeds matters entirely. You cannot skid straight to external actions without first rectifying the foundational state of the heart.
Because if the foundation is bad,
If the heart is contaminated by ostentation, what we call riya, the deed is completely voided regardless of how beneficial it appears externally.
So applying that to our Friday group chats, let's talk about actual brain chemistry for a second. When I get a message and I hit forward to 50 people, am I genuinely supplicating for them or am I just looking for a cheap dopamine hit?
That's the million-dollar question.
Right. Does sending that glittering graphic give my brain a false neurological reward? Do I get to feel righteous and pious for 3 seconds while allowing myself to completely avoid the actual difficult spiritual work of Friday?
That is the exact psychological trap al-Shurafa points out. True connection requires agonizing sincerity. You have to pause and ask yourself a piercing, uncomfortable question. Am I sending this message to genuinely supplicate for my brother, Or am I mindlessly pressing forward to maintain social appearances, to avoid guilt, or to assert my digital relevance?
Ouch.
Yeah. Ostentation, Rhea, is not always dramatic. It's not always standing on a brightly lit stage showing off your charity.
Oh.
Often, it is as quiet, insidious, and pathetic as seeking micro-validations through religious aesthetics on your phone. The superficiality of the modern greeting often masks a profound, crippling spiritual laziness.
Seeking microvalidations through religious aesthetics, that is devastatingly accurate. We curate a vibe of piety without the substance. So how do we fix it? If I want to be a good friend on Friday, what do I actually do?
We look to the methodology of Omar Suleiman. He consistently challenges believers to substitute these debated, shallow cultural fillers with authentic, verified prophetic habits that carry massive weight.
Give me an example.
Instead of sending an unsanctioned text message that might just annoy the recipient anyway, utilize the undisputed actions that guarantee divine reward. For example, he points to the hidden hour of Friday, the time between Asr and Maghrib prayers.
The hour when the heavens are open and dua is universally accepted.
Exactly. Suleiman issues a very practical challenge. If you truly wish well for a friend on Friday, rather than texting them a generic pixelated graphic, use that hidden hour to make a private, sincere, desperate dua for that friend in their absence.
Without even telling them.
Without telling them. The Prophet stated that when a Muslim supplicates for their brother in their absence, an angel is appointed to reply, Ameen, and to you the same.
Think about the upgrade there. You trade a text message that might be left unread for an angel directly petitioning God on your behalf.
That approach aligns perfectly with the Sunnah, carries guaranteed immense reward, and avoids any pitfalls of bid'ah. It is the ultimate spiritual life hack.
But I want to advocate for the other side again, because a lot of people say they send these messages because people are lonely.
And that's very real.
Right, they aren't trying to show off, they're just trying to let someone know they exist. Which brings us to the incredible, necessary work of Dr. Rania Awad.
Yes. Dr. Awad provides a critical, clinical, and psychological dimension that we cannot ignore. Through her work at the Stanford Muslim Mental Health Lab in Maristan, she notes that human beings are inherently wired for connection.
We need each other.
We do. Isolation is a primary, devastating driver of modern psychological distress. From a clinical perspective, a weekly Friday check-in can serve as a vital social tether, especially for marginalized individuals, the elderly, recent converts, or those living alone who don't have a physical community.
It can literally be a lifeline. The ping on their phone is the only proof they have that day that someone cares about them. But there's a difference between a genuine lifeline and a holographic, right?
Absolutely, and that is the profound life lesson from Dr. Awad, the absolute necessity of meaningful, empathetic connection. An automated graphic lacks the therapeutic weight of genuine inquiry into a person's emotional and spiritual well-being. It is not pastoral care.
It's just a placeholder.
Exactly. It is a Band-Aid on a bullet wound of loneliness.
So the actionable advice here is, instead of an emoji, pick up the phone. Call them. Ask them how their heart is doing. That mirrors the actual prophetic model of care, taking the time to listen, to be present in their suffering, rather than hiding behind a forwarded image.
That's real ukuwa right there.
And this idea of authentic, robust community connection is deeply explored by contemporary female scholarship as well, isn't it?
This is a vital nuance because historically, the classical discourse surrounding Friday often implicitly centers on the male legal obligation to attend the physical Jumu'ah congregational prayer.
Because women aren't obligated to attend.
Right. But contemporary female scholarship provides a much more expansive, holistic view of how the entire community engages with sacred time. Dr. Haifa Yunus, for instance, focuses heavily on the internal mechanisms of Friday.
What does she emphasize?
For her, Friday is an internal reset. The quiet, deliberate recitation of Surah Al-Kahf serves as an anchor against the relentless tribulations, the fitan, of the modern world. The focus is drawn inward, completely away from the digital performative space.
And Dr. Farhat Hashmi emphasizes the intellectual recalibration, right? Friday is prime time for deep educational reflection with the Quran.
Yes.
It is an intellectual engagement, a time to realign your worldview with divine revelation, rather than just exchanging social pleasantries.
Exactly. And when we look at Ustada Tamar Gray and Ustada Zainab Ansari, they highlight the vital role of community building. Ustada Gray's concept of a spiritual sorority is fascinating here.
A spiritual sorority, I love that.
While women are not legally obligated to attend the physical Jumu'ah prayer, the spiritual ethos of the day, the blessings, the time for dua, belongs to them equally.
So how does the Friday greeting fit into that sorority? Is it banned or can it be redeemed?
Exchanging Friday greetings online can actually build a powerful spiritual sorority, but only if it is elevated from empty cultural filler to a robust mechanism of mutual spiritual
It
accountability.
has to be rooted in substance.
Exactly. Sharing beneficial knowledge, offering raw emotional support, and holding each other accountable to engage in the sunnahs of the day, like sending salawat upon the Prophet. When grounded in accountability rather than aesthetics, the digital network becomes a force for profound strength.
But as we try to implement all of these beautiful, profound life lessons, seeking the hidden hour, building authentic connection, disconnecting from the suffocating air of the dunya, we hit a structural wall.
A huge wall.
The very technology we use is fundamentally mechanically at odds with the classical rulings we've been discussing.
We are looking at a synthesis of contradictions and massive gaps. The first major contradiction is between intent and action. There's a tragic disconnect here.
Break that down for us.
The masses, everyday Muslims, text Mubarak out of love, shared identity, and a desperate desire for community all values that are highly praised in Islam.
Right.
But the jurists, operating strictly within the legal methodology of classical jurisprudence, evaluate the action based on its structural resemblance to ritualized worship, classifying it as a blameworthy innovation.
It honestly breaks my heart a little because both sides are operating out of love. The masses love their community, and the jurists have a fierce, protective love for the purity of the Sunnah.
It's true.
But it reveals a massive gap in grassroots education. People just don't know the difference between a harmless cultural habit and liturgical sanctity. They don't know they're playing with theological fire.
They don't, and it leads to so much unnecessary online hostility and confusion every single Friday. But there is a second, perhaps even more complex gap that scholars are dealing with right now, the massive gap in digital jurisprudence, or fiqh al-nawazil.
Right, because this is all new.
The classical texts, like Al-Tabari and Al-Qurtubi, built their rules of greeting based on physical, face-to-face, synchronous encounters. You walk past someone in the marketplace in Baghdad, they look you in the eye and say salam, and you reply right then and there.
But digital communication is asynchronous. It's not one-to-one, it's one-to-many, it's broadcasts, which leads to a deeply relatable panic for anyone with a smartphone.
Oh, the digital fatigue.
Yes. If Al-Qurtubi says responding to a greeting is a mandatory obligation, what happens when I wake up, check my phone, and see I've been added to a WhatsApp broadcast list of 500 people? Does responding to automated graphics become a massive, crushing burden?
It certainly feels like one.
Instead of bringing me the peace and diffusing the hostility that Al-Tabari talked about, it causes severe social anxiety. I'm sitting there thinking, am I sinning if I don't reply to 50 automated images of roses?
That is the unprecedented nature of the digital age, and contemporary scholars are actively wrestling with this paradox. How do you apply a 7th century face-to-face ruling to a 21st century asynchronous server?
It's like fitting a square peg in a round hole.
The data suggests a currently fragmented approach. We are awkwardly superimposing the rules of physical presence onto digital interfaces, and the seams are splitting. The juristic consensus on whether an automated mass-broadcasted graphic demands an individualized mandatory response under Quranic law is still lacking. It is a completely new frontier of adab, or digital etiquette, that is actively being written by scholars today.
Which brings us to the ultimate synthesis of our journey today. We have traveled from the strict, protective legal doctrines of the classical giants to the nuanced psychological tafsir of our social interactions, straight through to the dopamine hits and digital anxiety of our modern smartphones.
If we synthesize all of this, if we distill it down to its essence, the ultimate goal isn't just to arbitrarily convince you to stop sending an unsanctioned text message. The goal is much deeper.
What is the goal?
It is to consciously, deliberately replace the noisy, hollow, automated digital validation of our era with the profound, silent, and deeply authentic prophetic practices that truly render a Friday blessed.
It's about turning off the notifications. It's about opening Surah Al-Kahf and letting the words wash over you. It is about radically disconnecting from the relentless, suffocating grind of the global economy and connecting sincerely, quietly, and completely with the Creator. You don't need a glittering graphic to prove your devotion. The heavy lifting of the soul happens in the quiet, unseen moments.
It raises a final, provocative thought for you to carry into your week and, honestly, into your life. If our digital habits are shaping our spiritual realities, if we are substituting text messages for private dua, what other areas of our faith have we outsourced to automation?
That's a scary thought.
Are we allowing the ease of technology to atrophy our spiritual muscles? The effort, the struggle, the hidden sincerity, that is where the divine reward truly lies.
That is something we all need to deeply reflect on. Jazakallah khair. May Allah reward you with goodness for spending your valuable time with us. Connect with us. Join our growing family on this sacred journey of Islamic knowledge. Please subscribe and hit the notification bell to stay updated. Your support helps us spread this message of peace and beauty further. May Allah grant us all the strength to follow the path of truth, increase our knowledge, and accept our humble deeds. Ameen. May the message of peace, tolerance, and harmony of Islam reach every heart.